If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it.
But we now have again our NBA Finals matchup. It is one I would assume many folks had not predicted ahead of this playoffs. The Miami Heat are in Denver to take on the Nuggets for Game 1 of the Finals on Thursday. The Heat advanced to the Finals after staving off a Boston rally from being down 0-3 to win Game 7 in Boston. Meanwhile, the Nuggets have been essentially in chill mode for more than a week. They haven't played since May 22nd. That's when they beat the Lakers to complete a 4-game sweep in the Western Conference Finals. It has been 24 years since the Knicks have been in the NBA Finals, but in my opinion, watching these finals matchups has often served as an important indicator for me of what it will take for the Knicks to get to that level. So Tommy has some very important questions regarding this finals matchup before we get into predictions for this matchup, and they're Knicks related. So I'm asking you for each team. I'm going to start with the Nuggets. What is something about the Denver Nuggets? And let's take away they have Nikola Jokic, something like that, like something with like a guy on their team. But what is something about the Nuggets that you want the Knicks to implement to their team and how they run their squad and how they play from a night-to-night basis?
Yeah, exactly. Just draft one of the 15 greatest players of all time in the second round.
That'll certainly jumpstart the rebuild, right?
That'll help a franchise. No, seriously, I think. First of all, they drafted Jokic, and obviously it's parts luck, parts scouting, however you want to phrase it.
Yep.
But then they knew what they had, and they stuck with it. A lot of people said, "Don't trade Nurkic. Are you crazy? To create room for this Jokic guy." And 2 MVPs and another second place MVP and a finals trip later. That was obviously the right decision. But I think big picture, to directly answer your question, it's just to stay patient. There could have been some panic moves made, getting ousted in the first round last year with an MVP candidate. But the reality was, let's wait for Jamal Murray to come back. Let's not do anything crazy. Let's kind of work on we have our cornerstones here with Murray. We trust he'll get healthy. He's going to do the right things in Jokic, and let's build out around that. Smart trade for Aaron Gordon. I'd love the Bruce Brown signing this offseason.
Yeah.
Bringing in veteran presence like Jeff Green. It's this right mix of rolling the dice and taking chances when you feel it's necessary by drafting Michael Porter Jr. Even though we slipped to 14, there was still obviously a great deal of rest coming off his back injury in college. So there's kind of all these things that work together, but a lot of those pieces have been together for a while now. And in other markets and other if maybe Denver's a little bit more laid back, potentially lends itself to these not kind of rushed moves. But credit to the Nuggets, the front office, keeping Mike Malone, there for year after year after year. Some success, some ups and downs, but it's all paying off right now, and there's something to be said for that patience and continuity that that you could argue that the Knicks could benefit from this offseason.
I think that's a very good point regarding patience, because with the Knicks losing the second round, I think people, with every Miami Heat win, people feel better about perhaps the Knicks losing to that team, considering that this is a championship caliber team, apparently, because they made it to the NBA Finals. I think for me, and I think my sportsman crush on Michael Malone is probably well documented from my Twitter account. He is probably my favorite coach in the NBA. And I'm a harp on him, something that he does that I think I would really like Thibs to incorporate into what he does and what he brings as a head coach, which is brutal honesty when talking about the level of play his team is playing at. I think that what I've loved about Michael Malone is not something a lot of people are getting very familiar with him in this playoff run. He has been like this since when he was in Sacramento.
Yeah.
He was probably the only coach ever to get DeMarcus Cousins to actually listen for a couple of weeks and actually play hard. And a lot of it was because of his approach to how he talks about his players. It is with a lot of love, but it is with a lot of brutal honesty. And to me, what I see from him is a guy that when they were struggling towards the end of the season, he wasn't sitting there saying, "Oh, we'll be fine and things will be okay." And he was saying this effort is not to the championship caliber that we are striving for. And if we continue to play this way, we will not advance to where we want to go. We will get bounced early. He will say how it is. And no, he's a Queens guy, and I'm a Queens guy, so maybe that's why I relate to him as much as I do. But to me, that's one of the things about Tom Thibodeau that has been the most frustrating, has been when there are things that anybody who knows anything about basketball can see with their plain eyes. And then you go to the press conference, you have the coach not acknowledge that these things are issues. I think it creates a lackadaisical kind of mentality amongst the team, or at least among certain players, maybe not the whole team, that doesn't allow certain issues to get addressed. So I think for me, it comes with Michael Malone and how he approaches being an NBA head coach. I would hope that Tom Thibodeau could take a page from. I'm not saying you got to go out there and just blast your guys every single time things don't go well. But when you hit these little infliction moments in your season, which the Knicks had a couple of times, and you decide to kind of poo-poo it or kind of diminish what everybody sees as real problems, that I think is why you don't get to the mountaintop. Like Phil Jackson was not afraid to call out Shaq and Kobe when they weren't doing things correctly. Greg Popovich is not afraid to call out Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili. In fact, a lot of those guys, especially with Pop, the whole thing with them was that he coached everybody the same, which is why those teams were so successful. I think I need Tom Thibodeau to bring that same energy to the Knicks next season if he wants to remain Knicks head coach, in my opinion.
It's a good point. I am the first to kind of diminish the impact that coaching has in games, and I'm more about its talent, and obviously coaching is a part of it. But I have to admit, if Mike Malone was coaching the Celtics this season, you'd have to think that they'd have a better chance at
Right.
they might be playing today. And a lot of folks were getting on Missoula for not calling out the players as much. And I was, one of the things I was thinking was pushing back. Listen, a first-year coach can't say it; he's just trying to curry favor. But
Right.
You're right, Malone, dating back to his days with the Kings when he didn't have job security and finals
Right.
trips and all this, resume, like he was, straight up front right off the bat. So arguably I think most people would agree the two best coaches in the NBA are coaching against each other in the
Yes.
finals. So that lends credence to the belief that coaching is certainly of value. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and player roster composition, all that stuff is
Yeah.
obviously important. But when you get to these, these hierarchy, game sevens and preparations
Yeah.
in final series and Eastern Conference Finals, Western Conference Final Series, that's when coaching can have a greater impact than a stretch of games in January, February, etc.
And think about this as well. We talk about how blunt Michael Malone could be about his team in talking about whether they're playing great or whether they're playing terribly. You've never heard Michael Malone say, I got to watch the film before I make any judgments about what's going on. Like, I don't know Tom Thibodeau. Michael Malone's a pretty damn good coach. He's pretty accomplished. He's pretty smart. He's been an assistant coach for a long time. He can give an assessment about how his team's playing, particularly about effort, that doesn't require him to watch the game 4 times. So when we talk about these nonsensical things Thibodeau talks about in terms of why he can't talk about why the team is struggling or things that they're not doing to a certain level, the whole I gotta watch the film is just not an excuse. This is a guy that took his team to the NBA Finals, and he don't seem to have to watch the film to know whether or not his team is giving maximum effort. So,
and also, if he watched the film and saw a guy not try, for possession
Right.
after possession after possession, he wouldn't be afraid to call out that player publicly and answer the carpet. And maybe one season he'd try and let the player get away with it because he felt, based on a personal relationship, that might be beneficial, but not time and again and again and again, year after year after year.
Exactly. Now, speaking about the Miami Heat, and as much as it pains me to make this comment because I hate the Miami Heat as a Knicks fan growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, what is something about the Miami Heat that you would like to see the Knicks implement in terms of how they run their team?
Yeah, listen, I mean, it's obvious. The answer, I think, is pretty obvious, and it's a cliche at this point. It's a meme at this point, but Heat culture,
Right.
and you got to respect it, because the proof is in the pudding. The Heat are preparing for a Game 7 NBA Finals after beating the Celtics in Game 7, and if should the Heat find a way to beat the Nuggets, this will go down as one of the most impressive postseason runs in NBA history. Knocked off the number 1 seed, the odds on by far championship favorite Bucks in the first round. Knocked off the Knicks in round 2. Team with the second best record, they play in the Eastern Conference Finals. Beat them in 7 games after losing games 4, 5, and 6 on the verge of an historic collapse. Come back, take a gut punch. literal buzzer beater in Game 6, the first one in a playoff game of that magnitude since, I believe, a literal buzzer beater since Jordan shot over Craig Elo. It's fascinating. And should they go on to beat the number 1 seed in the West, that romped through the Western Conference playoffs, would really be an impressive run. And a lot of it has to do with accountability. We talked about it with Mike Malone, and that's the underpinnings of the they demand effort, they demand hustle, they demand those other things that other teams hope for. You want to sign talented players and hope they play hard. They sign guys that work hard who also happen to be talented, and you see it. And another thing, obviously, is development of undrafted players and finding diamonds in the rough. So I think those are two things going forward that obviously every team in the NBA can learn from.
Yeah, you mentioned Heat culture, and I think on that same note, I think particularly how the Heat empower their role players to play like stars when needed. Because we saw it in the last series with Caleb Martin, where it wasn't a Heat team saying, hey, we're just going to run every single play through Jimmy Butler, and it's going to be Jimmy Butler or bust, whether we win or lose these games. Like, if they got a guy who's playing well, who has talent, they empower these guys to make plays. And Caleb Martin goes out there, plays with no fear, plays with no conscience, and undrafted, it doesn't matter once you're in the NBA. Once you're in the NBA, you're in the NBA. And you're in the NBA for a reason. All these guys have talent. And I think the way the Heat empower their role players, whether it's Martin, whether it's a Gabe Vincent, whether it's a Max Strus, whether it's a Duncan Robinson, and you hear the way Jimmy Butler talks about these guys, how much confidence he has in these guys. That gives these other guys confidence as well. And I think for the Knicks, how many times did we watch the Knicks this past season and said, why don't they get Quentin Grimes more involved? Why don't they run more plays for Obi Toppin? Why don't they play a man quickly more minutes before the Brunson injuries and he had to play more time? Sometimes the Knicks are kind of slow to say, hey, we don't have to just live or die with Brunson and Randall. We can get these other guys involved and make these other guys part of the game, let these other guys make plays. I think the way that he developed their guys is a main reason why these guys are successful, of course, but also the way they empower these other players and get these guys shot attempts, get these guys involved in the offense. It allows these guys to stay ready so that when there is an injury to Tyler Hero or Jimmy Butler doesn't have it on a certain night, that these guys can step up and play great. I mean, the Knicks saw how effective Strus and Duncan Robinson and Martin and Vincent could be in that last series. There was a game where Jimmy Butler didn't play and they still almost won. So I think for me, how the Heat empower their role players is something I would love to see the Knicks do, because I think that's what, in the end, makes a great championship team.
And I think a lot of it starts from the top down. Obviously Riley to Spoelstra to Jimmy Butler, that kind of hierarchy are on the same page, and there's an understanding there, but there's also a humbleness there. And it sounds silly, but it's something we talked about during the regular season at times. Randall's insistence that he was going to shoot free throws on technical free throws, that is something that, that Spoelstra would have called out and said, listen, you're not the team's best free throw shooter. Who do you think you are, stepping the line like that? And guys on the Heat knowing that, Jimmy Butler in a game 7, in a game 1, in a must-win game 4 on the road is going to play both ends of the floor. When you have your hardest, your best player, Jokic, you can speak the same of. He's obviously not as skilled or athletic as Jimmy Butler, but in terms of intensity and effort, and unselfishness, those are traits that kind of seep down to the rest of the team. And when you have a player, your highest paid player, your leading scorer, who doesn't, let's put it kindly to Mr. Randall, doesn't embody those same characteristics, it can kind of have a trickle down effect, which is why, despite the regular season success, we'll be talking about the Knicks potentially trading Julius Randle, even though he's an All-NBA performer. So there's so much to weigh there. But, we talked about coaching. Chemistry is obviously another huge thing with both of these teams. Yeah. You can see it's impossible not to notice the closeouts on shooters. From the highest paid player to the Alonzo Highsmith. Playing 5 minutes a game. Just
Hayward Highsmith.
Hayward Highsmith too.
I always want to call him Alonzo too because of the Miami connection. The U football player.
Right. It's just that, again, a lot of it has as I said, kind of trickle down effect from the top, front office, coaching staff, best player. That when you have an alignment there, that's good news.
And no one on the team has a sense of entitlement. Think about Duncan Robinson has that insane 2020 run in the playoffs where he established himself as maybe the best shooter in the NBA. And he gets this massive contract. And then next year, couple months in, they're like, this guy ain't cutting it. Have a seat. Have a seat, and we'll tell you when we're ready to put you back in. This guy, Max Strus, who's making basically peanuts, is bringing more on the defensive end. He's a more versatile player. He's going to go in. And the fact that they're able to do that to a guy like that, and that guy still be hungry and still be ready to produce when his number is called, like it is in this postseason when Tyler Hill breaks his hand, it's just a testament to what they've built as, I hate to say it again, Heat culture. It just is what it is.
100%. And he could have complained. He could have demanded trade. All those another perfect example. Caleb Martin. They didn't make many signings after losing Game 7 in Boston the year before. They let PJ Tucker go. Financial restrictions. Caleb Martin doesn't play well essentially for the first half of the season. Decent but not great. Kevin Love gets waived by Cleveland. They sign him off the street, bump Caleb Martin to the bench, insert Kevin Love in the starting lineup. Caleb Martin doesn't bellyache. He makes the most of his opportunities. Eventually, as the playoffs were on, he outplays Kevin Love in a dramatic fashion. Kevin Love gets bumped back to the bench. Yep. You see Kevin Love cheering on the sideline and supporting his team. Caleb Martin back in the starting lineup and was a vote away from being most valuable player in the Eastern Conference Finals. So again, perfectly to illustration of your point, the Heat culture, the accountability, the unselfishness, all that type of stuff. Looking for players that don't necessarily bring just talent to the table, but also the other intangibles that the other teams are looking for.
You just get the impression that anybody who's on the Heat roster is willing to do whatever it takes to win, and that's all they care about. They don't care about anything else. And I'm not going to say like this is a Knicks problem because I think that that's not natural for most NBA teams to have like 12 guys on the roster that's willing to do whatever it takes to win. Right. So that means Caleb Martin's got to score 25, then he's ready and willing to do that. That means Caleb Martin's got to play 10 minutes and play behind Kevin Love. That means he's willing and able to do that. If it means Jimmy Butler's got to score 50, he's willing to do that. If it means he's got to have 10 assists and score 12 points, he's willing to do that. Like instilling that culture. And to Tom Thibodeau's credit, I feel like he talks about that a lot. He does try to talk about that and say that like winning is all that matters and that you need to see what you're doing to contribute to winning. He's often made those kind of comments related to RJ Barrett. Barrett has struggled with scoring. So I'm not going to act like Tom Thibodeau doesn't talk about this. But you got to be about it for all 12 guys on the roster. Like I said, it can't be excuses or exemptions for certain guys because they give you 20 and 10. Or even Jalen Brunson. He's a guy that is a great offensive player, but is not giving you defense on some nights. You can't just say, well, he's a great point guard, so we're just okay with that. And Jalen Brunson, he keeps himself accountable, so I'm not so worried about him. But that aspect, that idea that everybody, how many times we saw Mitchell Robinson belly aching because Knicks won a game by 20, but he had 2 shots. Like that kind of thing just doesn't fly with the Miami Heat. Like, wasn't that guy Dedmon on the team and like he was going crazy during one game this season? They got him out of there so fast. Like I could say his name, he was on another team. Like that's just not going to be allowed or accepted in Miami. And it's all in or all out. That's it. Like I have so many people talking the story about LeBron James going to Pat Riley's office and saying, yo, like, we're just not with this guy, Eric Spoelstra. And Pat Riley being like, who the hell are you to tell me how to run the team? He's saying that to LeBron James. I understand he's Pat Riley, but he's saying this is the best player in the world, one of the greatest players of all time. And he's saying, who the hell are you to tell me how to run an NBA team? You are part of a team. And if Pat Riley can do that to LeBron James, that's a message to everybody that ever comes to the Miami Heat about who's in charge, what the demand is, and the attitude of either you're in or you're out, and it's all about winning, and that's it. And I really hope that the Knicks find a way to recreate that aspect, because I think to me it embodies New York City. It's why Pat Riley and his teams in New York were beloved, because they kind of had that same mindset.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And to also, as you noted, this is not something that's singular to the Knicks. Every team
exactly
is jealous of the way the Miami gets their guys to buy in.
Exactly. So, who you got in this series? Miami, Nuggets. Who wins how many games?
Yeah, and listen, we just waxed poetic and threw far too many flowers at the Heat. So, this comes from a place of respect for what Miami has done. Right. I picked them to beat the Celtics. That being said, I think the Nuggets are too good, too deep. They have no answer for Jokic. Bam is a good defensive player, but a bit undersized against, the big size, strength, IQ of Jokic. So I got the Nuggets in 5. I think
Wow.
they're going to make relatively short work of Miami. Again, would I be surprised if the Heat win? Nothing the Heat that has happened this postseason would shock me. So again, with giving all the ton of credit to Miami, we talked about all the reasons why they've been successful. There are a lot of reasons why the Nuggets were able to sweep the Lakers, a good Lakers team, why they've cruised basically, since January with the best record in the Western Conference. I think this is with as well as Jamal Murray's playing, with his, you bring Bruce Brown off the bench. I think Aaron Gordon's going to do a good job holding Jimmy Butler in check. Michael Porter Jr. is going to knock down some threes, and then Jokic. I think this is going to be a coronation of Jokic, the player that he's been the last 3 years, hasn't been respected properly. I think he's going to put the crown on over the next couple weeks and really let the world know I'm not just a good player. I'm not just a great player. I plan on going down as one of the greatest players of all time, and here's my kind of first entry into letting the world know that I'm here and I'm for real.
Yeah, I'm going with the Nuggets. I'm gonna say it's 6. I'm giving the Heat 2 games. I think that the Heat have just shown that against all odds, like they're just not a team you could ever count out, and I think that anybody can make short work of them. And look, I doubted them every series they played in. I picked them literally to lose every series they played. So I guess I'm picking them to lose again, but I think this is probably the one I'm giving them the most respect and saying, hey, the team that's essentially dispatched the entire Western Conference and has been, probably the best overall team in the NBA for much of the season. I think you're going to win 2 games at least in this series. If they go 7, that wouldn't surprise me either. But I agree. I think the Nuggets just have too much firepower. I think Miami kind of hurt themselves going to 7 against Boston. They needed to dispatch them a lot quicker. They needed all the rest they could get, all the potential, planning and game planning and strategizing, trying different things in practice to kind of get themselves ready for this series. I think losing that time, I think was costly. I think had that not happened, I think this maybe is a 7-game series and maybe it's more of a swing series in my opinion. I think going that far down the road against Boston, I think hurt them. So that's why I'm picking the Nuggets in 6. But it should be
plus
an entertaining series.
You give Mike Malone 12 days to prepare for an opponent. That's trouble.
Yeah. Exactly. So we'll see how the finals goes. We'll continue to update you guys on the latest involved with the NBA finals. But thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest podcast ventures. Links will be in the descriptions. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.